All right, here we go. Welcome, anyone and everyone who stumbles across this, to my brand new channel where I'm going to be doing primarily horror movie reviews, but I have a few other fun things that I'm going to be eventually doing. I just need to get into the swing of doing this, but I'm not gonna stray too far from what we're here for today. You clicked on this video because you know that we're looking at Weapons, released earlier this year. Now, this movie is interesting because this was probably one of the most hyped up movies of 2025, and I'm not surprised because it is the next film by Zach Kreger, who many of you probably know from having directed Barbarian in 2022. Now, real quick, Barbarian is something that I'm going to get to on this channel. I just want to get past the few that I actually have scripted and planned before I get into taking requests, and then I can start focus on writing reviews and stuff for that movie. But I'm not gonna talk about that today because today we're talking about Weapons. So Weapons is a lot of fun, and I'm gonna break it down just a gist of like what happens in the movie, just so that you if you've seen it already, it's a refresher. Now, if you've seen this movie, you know how crazy it gets. If you have not seen this movie, before you watch my review or any other YouTube review, please go watch it because it's the type of movie where you really, really want to get the full experience before you see it broken down on a YouTube video, because obviously this video will contain spoilers, and I feel like it would be a real bummer to have a movie this good be spoiled by me, or even if you happen to watch it anywhere else. So please, this is the type of movie you need to see for the first time, just in a dark room with some friends or whatever. Sit down, grab some popcorn, and watch it, because it really is a experience, I'll say that. So now that all the people that haven't seen the movie yet have gone, let me give you a little refresher for those of you who have seen it. So in Weapons, at like 2:17 a.m. in a small town called Maybrook, an entire third grade class, except for one boy named Alex, just completely vanishes, like without a trace. No notes, nothing. They just get up out of bed and walk out of their houses. Now, the teacher of this classroom that all the students disappeared from is under fire from the whole entire town for being suspicious. She's got people like engraving witch and crazy shit, like graffitiing her car, and it's insane. Now, eventually what happens, skipping, kind of the whole middle segment, which does drag a bit, and we'll talk about that later, but what happens then is we find out that Alex, the boy who didn't disappear, his crazy aunt Gladys, I'm not even going to try to say it right. His aunt is pretty much a witch who has been pulling the strings the whole time and cast this spell, or has this spell that she can cast where she can control people. All she needs is like some water, a stick, and like a personal item. Like she's using people's hair and any personal item you can name that belongs to that person. She uses it in this ritual to kind of turn them into quite literally weapons, as the movie says. So we learn throughout the movie that she's able to do that, and what she did was she made all the kids leave their houses and come to Alex's house, where we eventually find out that they've all been in the basement in some trance. Now, we go through the movie, it's shot from different perspectives, so it's kind of shown in like as if you were to read a book, and it breaks it up from different characters' point of views. Weapons does that. Now, we get through the movie, get towards the end, there's a huge showdown, and pretty much the boy, Alex, uses her spell against her. Now, what that does is it makes all the kids that were trapped in the basement chase her around through the whole fucking neighborhood, and when they eventually catch her, they just grab her and tear her apart in the most violent way imaginable. If there's an unrated director's cut of this movie, it's going to be absolutely balls to the walls insane, because the original is already graphic enough. And after that, there's a girl that narrates throughout the whole movie, and at the end, she just implies that the kids are broken free from their spell, but they're all left kind of fucked up with some really bad trauma, and the movie just kind of ends there and leaves it up for interpretation. So wow, I just spit everywhere. That was crazy. That's a general gist. Obviously, that's not the best. I'm not the best at explaining it, but it'll give you the idea. Pretty much, kids get saved, witch bites the dust, and no one gets a happy ending. Roll credits. But as wacky as that sound, I actually really did like this movie, and now we're going to break down some strengths and some weaknesses. So one of the strongest points of this movie is obviously the performances and how the characters are played by the actors themselves. Julia Garner plays Justine, the teacher who is, put in this horrible position of all of her class having disappeared. And she kind of brings these personal flaws like alcoholism and messy relationships to the front of the movie in a way that feels really real. And she's supported by more great cast members like Benedict Wong, gets his chance to shine, and Josh Brolin also is in the movie, and I think all the characters come together in a way that feels really believable, which in a world where horror is becoming a bit, like a cliche on itself, I feel like that can be hard to pull off, but Weapons does do that really well. So if you're looking for a movie with good character development, I do think this has that. Cinematography in this movie is great too. There's scenes that are, just mundane, normal things, and this movie happens to make them terrifying. Like, spoiler alert, there is a scene where Justine is parked outside of Alex's house, which, first of all, is wildly inappropriate for a teacher to do. Side note, she literally, peeks in his fucking windows at one point. I'm not even kidding. She peeks in this elementary school kid's windows of his home, which ends up being a good thing because it gives them clues on where the kids are, but I'd say in general it's fairly inappropriate. So that scene was kind of like, what? Like, who would do this? But anyways, so she parks outside of his house that following night, and she falls asleep in her car. Julie, the teacher, does. Now, it pans over from her car to Alex's house, and Alex's mother, I don't think we know at the time that it's his mother, but Alex's mother, this crazy-looking woman, opens the door, comes out of the house walking like this with a pair of scissors, walks up to Julie's window, looks in, sees her there, and then gets in the fucking back seat of the car. Now, this scene, I'm not gonna lie, it's one of the few things in recent horror movies that actually scared the shit out of me. I went to go see this movie with my mom and my girlfriend and my grandmother, and I'm sitting in the middle, between them, and when the mom came out of the house with those fucking scissors and, walked towards it, I gripped my girlfriend's leg, I grabbed my mom, I was like, this is it. This is one of the scariest things I've seen in a long time. And while we're on the subject of the cinematography, obviously the movie being told in chapters and kind of different points of view, starting from Julie, but then it goes to the dad of one of the kids who's missing, and it shows kind of his part in it and his view. Then it goes to a police officer, then a junkie, then Alex, and it all comes together in a really cool way. And I don't know if that's for everybody. We'll talk about that a little bit later. I know some people don't always love that style of jumping around. Some find it maybe disorienting. But I loved it, and I think it added a lot of depth to the characters, and it made it feel like you were really experiencing these things from their POV. And then at the end, when everyone kind of meets up and it all comes together, it feels a little bit more rewarding because you got to see everyone's point of view building up to that moment. And I think that movie pulled it off in a way that some others have failed to do. So props to Weapons for being able to pull off a task like that, because it's really not easy. Now, the movie doesn't try to be grim all the way. There's actually some funny, really good moments of dark humor that save it from being just another supernatural mystery film. A lot of the characters have really funny dynamics between them, and I think you need kind of that icebreaker in movies like this, because getting yourself comfortable with these characters and bringing it down from a really scary scene like the mom getting in the car, taking it from up here, bringing it back down, and then just coming at you with another twist that completely flips the movie up on its head. I feel like that's the way you should make a film like this, as opposed to having it be tense all the way through. Because then when you add those moments of, just a breath of fresh air, it still does manage to be tense. So there's one way it could be too tense and it doesn't quite work, or you can have interesting characters that have a sense of humor, that feel like real people, that break that up and don't make it feel like it's a horror movie. It makes it feel like people experiencing this weird phenomenon in this town, and it works really, really well. I can't say enough. I'm going to use the word works a lot. I cannot say enough how well this movie works. The hook and premise of this movie alone is so great. 17 kids at exactly 2:17 a.m. just leaving their houses and running off into the night is so bizarre that it sets up a movie like this perfectly. Because if you heard about that in the news, which there was a rumor that this was based on a true story, I think that ended up being horse shit, but if you heard on the news that this happened, how would you ever explain it? So it's such a good setup for a movie, and I think Kreger was the right person to do something like this, because Barbarian is one of those movies that, halfway through flips it on its head, and this does that. But I think in a way, now I like Barbarian more, and like I said, in the future we'll talk about that, but this movie almost has a little bit more of an interesting premise on the surface because you know what's going to happen. Barbarian never really explained what the movie was going to be about. This movie promoted everywhere that it was a story about 17 kids that just went missing with no explanation. And I think that's what intrigued people, was something so bizarre that they had to know what was going to happen. And I think that's a really interesting premise for a film. And I think that's what kind of pulls people in, is knowing that something so bizarre is happening that they need an explanation for it. Now, don't get me wrong, Weapons is absolutely phenomenal, but obviously it's not perfect. I'm going to talk about the characters in a bit more of a negative light this time around, because some of the decisions they made seem like they were put in there to push the plot forward a little bit, and the plot convenience just kind of shows its ugly face in some scenes. Like, the authorities, for example, all of the cops in the town, with the exception of the main, like, kind of one of the main characters, but just the police force and some of the adults in this town are so clueless, like, beyond credibility, that it genuinely doesn't even work. Like, there's points in this movie where I'm sitting here and I'm like, how has more investigating not been done on this subject? Like, it really, and even the characters comment on it. They're like, wow, the police are doing a half-assed job of figuring this out. But then as an audience member, I'm sitting there, I'm like, how are they not more concerned? Like, they show concern, but it feels so watered down that it's almost not even believable. I do feel like the character development in some places was a bit thin. Like, the main characters do get really good background story, and it does make you care about them, but I feel like some of the side characters and some of the POV moments are a bit fleshed out, and it's kind of like you lose interest in them because you just want to see the next thing that happens, and you're like, I don't know enough about this person. And you care because you don't want to see someone get horribly murdered, but you're like, I don't know enough about this person for the death scene to have the impact that the movie wants it to have. Like, you didn't ever really get attached to a few of the people that die in this movie. I'm not going to spoil every individual thing in case, like I said, you are watching this before watching the movie, which you shouldn't be doing. But I just feel like the movie tries to portray certain scenes as more dramatic than they are, and they haven't really had the backstory to back them up. The emotional fallout of what the families are going through is kind of like, I mean, it's touched on, but it almost feels like it's glossed over to maintain the mystery element. Like, you see a few grieving parents in the beginning when they're all in, like, this big meeting at the school, and Justine tries to go on stage and speak to the audience, but she gets booed off, and she gets followed home by one of the main characters. So they do touch on the grief aspect of it a little bit, but I feel like they wanted to keep it such a mystery that they almost didn't push too much, because they didn't really want that. They didn't want the audience figuring it out. This is one of those movies that you're going to try to figure out, but they did almost everything in their power to make sure you couldn't. And I think at times that's a bit of a downfall. And don't even get me started on the payoff of this movie, because I know how people have perceived it and, like, how some of the audience reactions to it have been. And I get it, because, like, the supernatural witch ritual isn't for everybody. I loved it personally, but I can understand, like, you know, if it feels a bit more conventional than some of the build-up might lead you to expect. Like, for viewers hoping for something a little bit more novel or metaphysical, some parts might feel kind of predictable in that sense. And along with that comes some plot threads that feel like they kind of exist just to make red herrings and to try and make you think, like, oh, I know what's happening, but then they just lead nowhere. And you know, it all brings it back to the witch at the end, which, like I said, I loved, but I can understand feeling a little disappointed by some of what the movie wants you to believe is happening. Like, the mix of tone from normal suburban life to dark horror and then to, like, dark comedy, it's really ambitious, but I feel like that tone shift being as intense as it is sometimes might be kind of a turnoff for some viewers that definitely don't see it coming. And it sounds like I've been shitting on this movie the whole time, so I'm gonna wrap this up and say that I did just critique a lot of negatives, but I think 90% of what I have for this movie is praise. It did scare me like not many films have in recent years. It really, really kept me on edge, and I was happy with it. And I want to see what Kreger does next, because as far as I know, I can't find, like, anything credible saying that he's going to be doing a horror movie next. If he does, I'll definitely cover it. But yeah, I mean, all in all, this movie's just like, kids get saved, witch gets shredded, and I ended up getting fucking popcorn stuck in my teeth. So with that being said, if you got anything from this review, I hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to give Weapons a 7 traumatized children out of 10. Thank you all so much for watching. I know this was probably weird and a little unprofessional and fairly brief, but I'm still, like I said, getting into the swing of doing this again for the first time. It's been a very long time since I put myself in front of a camera at all, so if this review didn't quite seem insightful or felt a little weird, it's because I'm really figuring out how I'm going to do this stuff. So I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please consider subscribing or dropping a like. It really does help. I'm going to be having another review coming out in a couple days, and I really think you're going to like what it is. So stick around if you want to see, because I got plenty of cool things coming. Thank you all so much. Keep it creepy. I'll see you soon.